So, welcome to the webinar, Let's Go Digital. It is being presented by Tracy Butler, CRDH, MFT, and we are going to begin shortly. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Tracy Butler. She is the CEO at Creative Ventures Development Group. Tracy is a multi-talented business leader who is passionate about education. She brings more than 35 years of dental industry experience. Tracy identifies as a strategic problem solver, change agent, visionary, executive mentor, and strategic coach. She poses expertise in talent optimization, the oral systemic link, regenerative dentistry, implant dentistry, function and/or relation, and service excellence. Tracy believes in building leaders at all levels. And now it is my pleasure to say, take it away, Tracy.
Thank you, Jessica, and good evening. I just want to echo your comments as you welcomed everybody to this discussion tonight. I know you all have a lot of choices with not only where you can receive and lean into education, but what you can do with your time. So super grateful that you chose to spend it with us. I'm doing my best. I'll do my best. I promise to make this fun. It may even surprise you at times. This might not even be what you might have expected. So hopefully we will exceed your expectations. And I'm, again, very grateful for your time, attention. I always like to say, I hope you have something to hydrate with, or if you need a libation, but bring something to, write down with and just present yourself as a dry sponge and soak this up. I've already alluded to, I'm going to take a bit of a spin on Let's Go Digital. And so I just wanted to, kind of build a disclaimer here that, I've heard, and I'm sure you have as well, if you're not growing, you're dying. And most of us who've been in this profession for over the last 5 or 10 years, things have changed quickly and continue to do so. And so some of you, like me, you've just spent the majority of your life in the tooth business. And yes, I call this a business. I'm proud to do so. And it's been an amazing journey to me to get to you from a busy clinical practice here in West Palm Beach, Florida, where I was really fortunate to understand and learn from great mentors around the importance of how and why teeth, gums, joints, and titanium deserve to live in harmony. I would almost add like zirconia too, and all these other great materials that we have in our laboratory. It was that clinical practice where I started to really understand the importance of the interdisciplinary team, and that journey then took me forward into mentoring different practices throughout US and Canada. And today, as the CEO of my company, Creative Ventures Development Group, as Jessica said, how I get to be with you all is really through some of that journey. And I want us to make sure we can keep in touch. Here's my information, my contact card. But obviously, Jessica and all our friends at NDX know how to keep us connected. So I'm going to kick it off here and say, once again, really grateful for your time and your attention. What we're going to cover tonight in what I like to call the discussion of Let's Go and Grow Digital is really understanding the team role. That's the meat on the bone tonight, is very much even getting a scanner or even tipping your toe in the water. It's around setting our mindset, but really also not only understanding the team, understanding some of what the blind spots may be, and of course the benefits. I like to borrow from Simon Sinek and say, the golden circle. We want to start with why, understand how we do, to then be able to translate what we do. And that's not only within the patient and team relationship, but also interdisciplinary throughout the dental team. And we'll discuss the digital chain, how that from capture to then, sending that file, what occurs, and really more importantly, how we can compress the resources that we've been doing and living in an analog world. And I'll share some of the stories with you. We'll discuss some of the options of iOS scanning and even some of the things you might not have thought about. And then I want to hopefully encourage you to leave us all this evening and make a plan and get your action plan, and just know that it's not a matter of if digital, It's really a matter of when and to what degree, right? You're at that right now. I celebrate you. I mean, obviously you're coming with your time and you know lots of things, right? I'm always starting at this place of, well, IQ and EQ, and where do they meet? So we know tons of information, or the way you do it, or your formulary. And it isn't until really, I believe, and hopefully you'll agree, that when we sit and understand the self-awareness of ourselves and then how to be understood, thank you, Stephen Covey, that I think it's the knowing you, and not only yourself, but your team and your patient. So we start with this Kai model. In every course or curriculum we build, we model this over and underneath of a Kaizen model. And we take that Kai, meaning change, right? And when they change, to some people, they're like, oh my gosh, change is scary. Change is inevitable. Change is constant, right? Change is fun. I even hear, right? Change is exciting. So we break that down into knowledge plus focused action equals impact. And that is where we will end tonight, is what information do you have, or are you thinking differently about, that you may decide after we get this time to chat together to take a different action plan, or to change one thing that creates lasting impact, yes, for sure, in your day-to-day, but ultimately in the lives of the patients that we get to serve. And that's really where the power of digital, I think, begins, is our agreement, if we can make one, right? As you saw in the beginning slide, it's a handshake. And if I could shake your hand, I would hope we could powwow in a huddle. It would really be an agreement around dentistry as a team sport. And it was back, I think now 2015, when some colleagues and I wrote an article in Compendium around the truly patient-centric approach, or what I like to refer to as the interdisciplinary model of care. And, in any decision you make in your practice, whether it's to change a material, to, implement a new system, a new practice management software, a new phone system, just new equipment in general, or even simply the color of your practice, the logo, the physical space, it's hopefully you're gathering and getting team input. And I don't say staff, because I don't believe we're an infection. And I really firmly believe that words really truly matter. And let me share this example with you. So as I was sitting there at the AO, and oh gosh, maybe 2014 now, we started to draw on a napkin, and we drew this model. Myself and a few restorative practices that were good friends of mine, some specialists, periodontists, oral surgeons, and we all came up with pretty much the same thing, that there's a dentist, the general restorative practice, of course, your lab partner, right? How critical the lab partner is in the success of our case outcomes. And all collaborating with, at the time, specialists that were leaders in that team approach. And so we put the patient in the center, like, yes, well, makes sense. We all work collaboratively to serve that patient in the center. And I thought about it, we thought about it, and I said, I think there might be some people missing in the movie, what I like to refer to as the rest of us, or the force multipliers. Hygienists like myself, I've spent decades chairside, looking into the eyes of a patient, helping them to fit into their schedule and budget the necessary dentistry prescribed by our doctors. And of course, collaborated with by our laboratory partner and the specialist. But there are also amazing chairside champions, or expanded functions dental assistants. I know you all have them, right? It's no fun to do this alone. First of all, this is hard, and it's better to do and go farther together. The admin team, right? That's your front office rock stars. These are critical people, especially when you're going digital. They're the ones that often get the questions asked. Well, do you have this, or are you this? And they can make or break that response or that relationship really over the phone. So really key and critical, important. Again, we see our lab partner here, which you're here tonight on behalf of, an amazing lab partner to you all, right? NDX Labs. And then product representatives. There are amazing product representatives that are out there that sometimes don't even get past the gatekeeper, past the door. I would encourage you to lean in and put these people on your team. And of course, collaborating with a specialist, whether you have someone in practice or you yourself are the specialist or you're placing dental implants today. And if you notice in the center, what our patient has been replaced with is the dental consumer. And I'd like to start here, really, before there's what scanner, what model, what file, what material are we going to use? Is it open, closed? What's the framework? Is that we need an agreement that patients are dental consumers and they're driving this force, this message. And I really love, if I can just offer this for you all for some consideration, is as you're looking to build a winning team, this is critical in moving digital or even expanding digital. I can't tell you how many practitioners I talk to that have purchased a scanner or some sort of technology, and it still remains either low utilization or underutilized, or even worse, unutilized altogether. And Amy Edmondson, she's at the Harvard Business School. Amy she's really been a leader and a pioneer in this approach of teaming or teamwork on the fly. And, that's so much of how I grew up in this tooth business is, wow, people show up late. They can't lean back in the chair. Sometimes they don't even know why they're there. They don't want to be there perhaps, and they'd rather be spending their money on something else. So when I looked at really building this discussion to meet with you all, it was around, let me share, the core value or the core fundamentals around building a high performing team. That's really where I believe it starts, that where I've witnessed, I've been a part of an underperforming team or just a team period. And I've been a part of a team that is truly teaming, that is interdisciplinary, that is agile, that is willing to accept the challenge and change, even though we may not know exactly the playbook. And I think that's where digital can come into play, but it also can be definitely a help in creating a beautiful formulary that is easily repeatable, that saves time, saves resources, and compresses ultimately time to tooth. So I share and offer you, this is our high performing team model that, along with that KAI method, the knowledge plus focus action equals impact. This is what we use when we're going in to help any practice do implementation or training, or even just elevating themselves from a level where they thought they were, where you really truly can thrive. And I'll start with just the understanding that we all learn lots of great stuff. I'm inviting you to somewhat just erase and clean your slate so we can unlearn to learn anew. And I promise this will be painless. I hope it's going to be fun for you. It's certainly fun for me. And I always start with Marty Cooper's story. Many of you probably remember him or know him, but I start here because when I talk to dentists and their practice and their teams, a lot of times I'll hear things like, well, we weren't a part of the decision, or we saw this piece of equipment showing up and here it is sitting on the kitchen table, and they're somewhat resistant to change, right? And I say, guys, do you have a cell phone? And most people are like, of course, I have a smartphone. But we all remember, phones weren't smart. They were pre that. They were the BlackBerry, and before that, the flip phone, and then that was the brick phone, and on and on. But I say to them, don't sweat it, right? We've all been through change, and you've done this before. While change for some can be scary, digital and the digital workflow in a dental team is no different. And doctors, if you're on with us tonight, you may or may not know who can be the paddlers, the passengers, and even the sinkier shippers on your team. So I start with that, and I offer you, like, I don't know if any of you are old enough like I am to remember this company called Blockbuster and the story of what really happened to them. What really happened in a nutshell is they were resistant to innovate. They were stuck in, well, this is the way we do it. They're not the only commercial example, right? We've got things like Bed Bath & Beyond. You all know that they're moved totally online. They had to pivot with the business at hand, as do we. Dentistry, as we agreed, is a team sport, but also dentistry is a business that's evolved. We've come a long way from dipping x-rays to, I'll tell you, this is what I thought going digital was. Oh, we got rid of dipping radiographs and now we have digital. It's like, that's amazing. Look how, much faster it is. The patient comfort, we had to get used to some things. There was definitely some training involved. And, we thought going digital was going digital radiography. Obviously, today we better understand the advances in digital dentistry and just how far we can take this to provide patients the care that they deserve. And I always am a believer that we spend a lot of time on what I like to call this 49%, the clinical side, which is extremely important, teams. I recognize that. But it's oftentimes where we don't spend enough time is focusing on why we do what we do. More importantly, who we get to do it with or who we choose to do that with. And let's start with why, right? To borrow again that Simon Sinek model of starting with why. Why digital dentistry? Well, I'm very enamored and I've always been a student of the business side of our profession. And it wasn't until really uncovering these engines, right, that live under every hood of every dental practice, I could go in and do a practice assessment and look for and find and identify these 5 engines. It starts with capacity. How many opportunities do you have to help and serve the patients that see you and that come to you? And of course, revenue. There's a fee for what we do. You deserve to be paid for that, right? Patients recognize that. They're also dental consumers. In this sweet spot, or I like to call the warm red center, these patients who now have been replaced, in my words, to be what's called a dental consumer. They have choices. They expect to have options. And if you're not in this world of digital and technology, they may even replace you, right? They're looking for that. And that has been oftentimes as we do exit surveys with dental consumers leaving practices or joining new practices, that's a hot button for them. That's top on the list of why they may have chose to seek care in another dental practice. Expenses. Yes, there are investments that you and I must make in our business and in technology, including and in the people, right? As Jessica introduced me tonight, she mentioned a couple of words I'm not sure if you picked up on, but it's talent optimization. And that is what we focus on because the team can make or break your digital chain. And that is something I've witnessed. You probably yourself have witnessed some folks that, are really, really early adopters, or even some people on your team that might even say, which I've also seen, that's not my job. And when it comes to really the digital experience and the offering that we have, it's a team approach, for sure. So look at the patients as a dental consumer. We know that patients go through, once they receive this information of whatever they need, right? They go through these 4 quadrants because we know quadrants. So let's start in that upper left. They take some time to give a consideration like, am I in the right place, right? They're evaluating us. They're looking at our physical space. They're checking us out online. They're seeing what services we provide, or even that we're saying that we can. It's oftentimes patients we know can't buy a solution, not only to a problem they don't perceive themselves to have, but they also can't say yes to us if they don't know we offer that treatment. And that literally leads to the experience and setting up an experience where patients feel that they're receiving service excellence. They demand it, they're expecting it, and that includes technology and digital. And then advocacy, right? They want to do what other people are doing. And so I'm sure you all have seen reviews online, hopefully about your practice. And, you have an ability to influence that because people with teeth know other people with teeth. And they are going to talk all about you. And people with, some teeth that need to be replaced or dental implants or screw retained hybrid or a digital denture, like they are going to talk about you to their friends and family. And this journey that the patient goes through takes them from the moment of truth to really the moment of choice. And digital is becoming, or has now become, the forefront of what helps patients to really make decisions of, am I in the right place? Can they do what I need? Are they going to keep me comfortable? And that's where we really want to, I think, unpack what this start with why concept really means. So often we as dental professionals, and really frankly anybody, if you ask anybody, what do you do? They can tell you what they do 100%. They can even tell you how they do it. But it's the differentiation around why they do what they do and the articulation of why they do what they do that really can set you, your practice, and your team apart. So, ask yourself for a moment and ask your team, like, what do you really believe about digital dentistry? Is it an if, not a when? Is it a when, not an if? So I like to believe and share with you here, this is what I call my golden circle. So we start with why as we built and crafted these messages or these beliefs as a team. This took time to do. But I would suggest highly either reading or listening to Simon Sinek's book and leaning into me. I'm happy to be a resource for you here. But we start with why. Our why was we believe in meeting patients at their level so we can treat them at ours. Meeting them at their level, utilizing technology, utilizing digital as a big differentiation. And that welcomes people into, they know they're getting the best. Why? Because it's the latest technology, the latest techniques, and the latest materials. How do we do this? We achieve this by implementing the highest level standard of care in digital dentistry, using the best labs, right? The best materials. Of course, our educated doctors and their know-how, all collaborating with the specialists, the lab partner, the product representatives, of course, our team internally. And then our what? We just happen to be in the teeth business, right? When we don't lead with, well, we're dentists and we're Dentistry of the Palm Beaches, right? For example, when we lead with why, amazing things start to open. People are attracted to you. People want to naturally do what other people do, and they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This helped us to really recognize and start to prove this concept of, wow, we can build belief and trust and ultimately loyalty. And so I want to just kind of shift gears, but that's setting the tone. The setting the tone is, this is a team sport. Whose responsibility is it in the digital workflow? It's all of us, right? You may have someone that's accountable to a specific function or a specific job description in the flow of your digital workflow. But you want to make sure that you're recognizing this is a team sport and helping everyone on the team to feel as a part of building and implementing this, which leads us to, I want to talk about some not only benefits, but some of the blind spots, right? Some of the assumptions and blind spots that we can fall into. You've probably heard of, a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And of course, the patient can come in that they have an idea of what they know. And they might even say that they have a fixed mindset, or you might recognize that. And we are over here as the team, as the dental team, that we have the best, all of this. We have workflow, we have the digital, we have access to care, and we're just not breaking through that patient barrier. I'm here to tell you, it can also be the other way around. I've seen teams that have a really motivated doctor and they're really just not willing to take one more thing. It's like, oh, how do we have one more thing to learn? Or, who's going to do that? That's not my job. Where the patients are the ones driving. And what the research and the latest evidence that we're uncovering today is that patients are driving this digital engine. The patients in your dental practice today are driving these because of resources, because of time, right? People are busy. Post-COVID, we saw like, wow, we could actually do virtual consultations, and maybe some of you have retained that kind of workflow, but people don't have as much time. Maybe they're working as a hybrid from home or in virtual and in the office, but time. We all have the same 24. Thank you, Warren Buffett. And yet we all don't have necessarily the same pocketbook, and we're vying for an expendable dollar. So when we limit the time that patients have to spend, or the time that they have to wait, or the time it takes really for them to just get the smile they deserve, we're really winning on the way to building a thriving practice, right? A high-performing, thriving practice. But some of those blind spots and benefits can be training. So training is key. I can't tell you how many practices we've witnessed and gone into to do an evaluation on, they just know there's some things are off. And we interview the team and they're like, well, who was trained on this scanner, or who was trained on this, tool piece of equipment? And you get one or two people, but there's been turnover on the team. So when that happens, we've got to include and bring back a trainer, or have someone on the team be a train the trainer. So I recommend having somewhat of what I like to call the digital expert, or the digital specialist within your practice. This is the person that is going to retain that training that you've paid for, you've invested in, right? Both in time and money and resources, that the training is critical. And you want to make sure that your training experience meets your expectations, that if there was a vacancy there, that you feel confident to speak up, or if that you need additional training, that you make time, but are also willing to give the time to allow your team and yourself to be fully trained. And that also includes on updates, right? We know that the digital workflow is continuing to evolve, thankfully, and constantly improving. And it might even feel like you're flying the airplane, or you're building the airplane while it's flying. But I get it. And I acknowledge you all for, making the time for training, but it also can be a blind spot when you've had turnover on a team that starts to kind of water down the impact of your training. The other is investment, right? There is, yes, an investment. You might say, well, how much is it? It's more than how much the actual getting in the game of the equipment is. It's your investment of not only money, but your investment of time, and your investment in your team, your investment in the belief that this is how we are moving forward. This is our clearly defined clinical philosophy, that we're going to not digital part-time, but maybe you're digital part-time right now. Like we were. I mean, we started out thinking digital radiographs were digital. Oh, a digital chart, right? I see so many practices still that have paper charts. I'm not throwing any shade on that. I'm just here to say that, these are not really what we're talking about tonight. Going digital is really getting that first step into the digital footprint, which is communication, right? Communicating digitally. You have a website, great. You have some sort of an online presence, awesome. Now it's time to get in that scanning, right? This is something that patients are driving, and frankly, they're demanding it, because impressions to them mean like, oh no, right? I don't know how many of you have ever seen the patient's face when they're like, oh, you're going to mix that goop up and put that in my mouth. And so we want to make it more, right, of course, modern, and modernize our care plan, but also increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of your diagnosis and our time. And here's a kind of a cute slide, but I know I kind of always like when we still only lean to the analog impression and the alginate impressions. I grew up way back when we were, mixing hydrocolloid and that whole world, but it is a little bit uncomfortable, and patients have memories. They're like, oh, I'm a gagger, or, I can't really do that. And these are difficult, right? I know that we get them and we get it done. And I used to be really afraid of like alginate and how to manage it. Now I'm a whiz bang at it, but it took decades to get there. And I thought, well, let's kind of look at, how many steps is it to go digital, to get like an impression. You've got your try-in, if you're doing something analog, okay, you got your try-in tray, you're going to take an opposing. It's just a couple steps, right? I mean, maybe you have to try in another tray. Maybe you take a couple impressions because this one had bubbles. And you get that, hopefully you get a successful impression, and then you pour it up. And maybe somebody trims it, and then you're off to the races. So is it really a few simple steps? So, I'd like to maybe offer for your for your acceptance that it's way more than just 3 to 6 steps, right? You've got to try in the tray. And then of course you want to try in the opposing and make sure that there's the right space. You might even have to try in a second time to get that right fit. And then depending on what type of tray, if it's a plastic tray, you might need to paint adhesive. If it's the metal trays, you're mixing up your alginate, making sure that it's all whipped together. Maybe you have the whip mix and you've got a nice beautiful mixture. You pack that in the tray and now it's time to seat it. You gather that excess. You tell the patient, wiggle your toes, breathe through your nose. All the little tips that we learned. And finally, you're waiting for it to set. Hopefully it's fast set and you're waiting for that to set and you're pulling it out or hopefully, right? Sometimes they get really locked in there. And now it's time to get it to the lab and pour it up in whatever stone. And here again, this was a whole stressful piece for some of our team members who, weren't really yet savvy at pouring up. Either the mix is too thin or is it too thick or there's bubbles or there's voids. So this takes practice, right? You guys would all agree. And I know you can do this really well. But mind you, this is just the 5th step where now we finally have a model that we can work with. And so in fabricating, let's call it implant dentistry, when we want to take an impression of that implant, now you've got to modify a tray for an open tray impression, if that's still where you are. And again, not throwing any shade. And then hopefully you can even make a custom tray, which we know is, much more accurate and comfortable. Of course, you've got to take another step to paint some of the adherence there. And now we're ready for okay.
Impression. We're going to dry the impression.
Now we're going to dry it, right? We're going to do all these things. Material. We want to then pull that impression. Now we got to take a bite. Of course, hopefully you get it the first time. I think we're on step 10 now. Yes. Okay. Step 10. Oh, the opposing impression, not the imposing, the opposing impression. Got to grab one of those. Or maybe you did a triple tray. Those can be a little risky, as you know. And hopefully you're feeling this situational drowning, like, okay, finally, now we're going to fabricate a temporary crown or some sort of temporary restoration, do the suck down. Yes, you've got your working time, but then there's also the time just to make sure that fits, that there's great occlusion, that we have, a perfect shade, that the fit is well. Okay, gosh, now it's got to make sure we have a healing abutment there. So we pick the shade because we're going to send this to the lab and ultimately get a prescription. Okay, all these great steps. And now we have to schedule the patient. Well, what do we schedule them for? How many visits do they actually need? And on and on and on. And of course, find them a time in the schedule, right? This is all happening. And then maybe they get that crown finally comes back or that restoration, and now we can seat it. So I'd like to just argue that it's more than maybe 3 to 6 steps. It's probably 16 plus steps. So why digital? It's really pretty simple. And I know many of you, I'm sure probably most of you, you're already in the game, right? You're already in that mindset of, okay, we want to be a resource for our patients. We want to be innovative. We want to be efficient, right? We want to maximize the resources and maximize time that we spend with patients. All of this starts with, 1, the decision, 2, the team, and 3, a really great scanner. And it doesn't matter which one to me that you really get and implement. Is it going to be utilized, right? They all can capture images to some different degree. And there's some truly amazing tools on the market and scanner models. But whether you start off at an entry-level scanner or you have just the cream of the crop, the Mac Daddy scanner, either way, I want to make sure that you got to implement and invest in your team to make sure that implementation is being pulled through so that the scanner is actually utilized. And some of you are utilizing scanners to do your restorative dentistry, great. Or maybe it's simply just only for certain procedures. I recognize that. I see that. And that's fine. Or even, hopefully to digitally plan a case, right? You need to capture all that. And these are the advances. These are the benefits that we have in digital dentistry, but it's simplified. It really is a scanner today can take you to a one and done, right? It can. I know there's more to it than that, but saving time, I mean, what is your time worth? What is your patient's time worth? I would probably think you would say it's invaluable. And I grew up on a farm in Iowa. We were taught, time is money, but really, is it only money? I mean, time, we don't get it back, right? Patients don't have, we all have the same 24. And so I'd like to say that, time is really it's not on our side. But when it comes to your decision to really go digital and more importantly, grow digital, it requires you. It requires leadership, and it really requires a thriving team, a high performing team that is teaming, that is working together and collaborating together, where you have the same beliefs, right? You start with that foundation of communication and connection, ultimately to share in a clinical philosophy, right? This is important. And it starts with you. We often will say to teams we get to work with is your mindset drives behavior, right? What you believe you can achieve, you've heard, right? Or if you don't believe, you won't do it. I've seen teams that sabotage themselves simply because their mindset was fixed, or I've seen a patient do the same. They had their mind made up. And that leads to our behavior, right? Our behaviors really drive the culture. And in dentistry today, we have an obligation to each other, to our teams and the patient we serve, that we need to be mindful of our behavior, because our patients pick up on that. They pick up on the tempo and the tone of the office, and they're looking. And also, ultimately, culture drives the performance. So when you have a high performing culture, a high performing team that believes in the dentistry and that is believing in, yes, we want to go digital and we want to grow digital, that is proud to state that to patients, to offer that as, this is why we're different here. This is how we differentiate, what we can offer you. All these linking key phrases, that drives performance. And we like to define leadership as a process of social influence, right? That's amongst one another, which also maximizes the efforts of others, optimizing what we call talents, right? Putting the right people on the right seat on your bus. And I know many of you have probably read that book, and Good to Great, Jim Collins, but ultimately towards a common goal. And what that goal would be is you would go back to your start with why. The goal we said was, we believe in reaching patients, all of our dental consumers, at their level so we can treat them at ours. They might not have been expecting dentistry to be as digital as it can be, but we're going to serve them there and we're going to bring them along. And that became a really huge practice builder for us in the digital workflow, is leadership and making sure that every member of the team was, felt a part of the journey, that felt and knew where their role and responsibility is and was, and that collectively we couldn't and needed each other. We couldn't do it alone. Something that I failed to put in here, but I'm going to give this to Jessica. She can put in the follow-up notes, is a reading list of some of the, amazing texts that are packed into not only going digital, but just dentistry as a whole, or building a high-performing team, right? This is not easy stuff we do. And just because we've communicated, or just because we say words, doesn't mean that they're heard. So that's where I think digital dentistry really helps to make and strengthen and build the connection with the team, but also with your patient. I mentioned it a few times that having a clearly defined clinical philosophy that also breeds transparency, where we're able to show patients their scans, right? And use that as a case presentation tool, and even then into what they would even look like, right? We've got wonderful technology now digitally and using AI, right? That helps us to see what a patient might even look like. Ultimately, we want to build trust, right? We mentioned that before. So starting with why is where I want you to focus, right? Not necessarily the what or the how, but starting with why. That we believe every patient deserves to have teeth, gums, joints, and titanium that live in harmony, right? And meeting people at their level so we can treat them at ours. There's lots of options that you have on the market to partner with different implant companies, of course. I'm sure you've made some great decisions for yourself, but I know you've made the best decision because you're partnering with NDX and you're here. You're here, a part of the community. And, you know, as we move forward, use us as a resource to continue to, I think, hone the skills of your team. But a few takeaways I want to offer before I open it up for questions are really around appointing a digital champion. A digital champion on your team will help to not lose that training and investment that you made. Again, if that person leaves, we want to make sure someone else is trained as your digital champion. That doesn't mean that it's not the hygienist's role to be scanning, which is where I want to also offer as a consideration. If you have a scanner in your practice and you're only using it for certain procedures, I would encourage you to start to welcome your hygienists into that world of scanning. It is the best patient education tool, far surpasses my intraoral camera or even my digital photography, because I can scan a patient. I can see so many things about their dentition, not only their wear, tooth position, even the clinical aspects of recession, periodontal recession, and we can use that from a baseline and ongoing. It's easy to do. There's a slight learning curve, I will agree, but hygienists, if you don't have your hygienists scanning, and I'll say boldly, every patient is our goal, you're really missing an opportunity. And as we look and learn to grow together and go digital, you're going to have an opportunity to experience some amazing courses throughout the NDX platform. And I really believe that as we came together tonight, when we said, well, we're going to unlearn to learn anew. And Henry David Thoreau says it the best, that when any real progress is made. So if you're already in the digital footprint and you have a scanner, or you're looking to upgrade your scanner, don't hesitate. Do that. But then it's one great thing to invest in that tool. You want to make sure that your team is fully on board, is fully trained, and is really engaged, clear and understanding. I would also recommend, that you do the dentistry on your team. They're the best billboards for what you do. And making sure that they've experienced this firsthand really helps to, I think, propel your practice so that you can not only go digital, but truly grow, right? This is something that we have an opportunity to grow together around, as you're thinking of digital and you're a digital champion, you want to also, if you're bold enough, like I was, is to ask your patients. Ask your patients what they really want, what they feel. I mean, I can tell you what thousands and tens of thousands of dental consumers have shared with us about why they chose their dental practice and what they want in digital. But I would suggest you all create what's called a patient advisory council, and that can be made up of a handful of patients, and you sit them down and ask them, what do you love about us? And the other side of the coin is, where can we improve? And just sit back and listen. What they will tell you is a wealth of information. That's really where I personally learned firsthand that our patients wanted us to be up on technology.